Dodger game in Arizona, of all places.
Oh
It is.
my.
But for one thing, well, I guess it's two things. They have very poor concessions there.
Oh, for you.
They have not one vegetarian item. I'm not kidding.
Oh my.
I don't even think they were no, they were not. No tacos, no dogs, no, nothing vegetarian. I think everything they said, everywhere I went, I think I could have had a pretzel. I had popcorn instead. That was not a very good dinner. No, then I had dinner after, but it was too late. But I had a burger, I had a veggie burger after, which was good, but I didn't want to eat at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
I especially didn't feel good after watching them lose so poorly. They played so poor. They didn't score a run. Not a run. Anyways, but I went last year to a spring training game, but it was a Padre game. And so I hadn't been in this park, the Camelback Park, for 4 years. So it was nice, but they haven't improved it. And the lines are terrible there. They're really long lines for everything.
You know, it's a great park. It's the Surprise Park.
Which is the one for?
Kansas City and Texas.
Oh, okay.
Because we live like 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes from that park. We had a house down there.
Yeah.
But that's a beautiful park.
Well, they have, it was weird because I was staying at a hotel and I was working there,
Right.
but a lot of meetings. But
You probably stay closer to.
I stayed Scottsdale. Yeah, I stayed over there. But I will tell you that there were people. Actually stayed in two different hotels, 2 days in one and 2 days in another. But I will tell you that all the hotels are filled with people that are for spring training.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big deal.
Down there in March, you go into the malls and it's packed.
Yeah, all
Every
people
restaurant is packed.
coming in to check out. We're on
It's
Facebook.
right in the Peoria park over where the Padres play over.
Yeah.
We used to go called the Arizona Broadway Theater. It's right almost in the same parking lot as the stadium, and people would park there a lot.
Well, why is it still not showing on? Oh, there it goes. Showing on Zoom. Sorry, Facebook that we're on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we are. Oh, no, my phone just died. Bye-bye. It did? I don't know. Mike's gonna check just to make sure we're on Facebook, because we actually get a lot of people on Facebook that check it out. But I know, look, I don't see John on yet, but John specifically said, are you gonna come in? And the Schwartzes are here. So somebody else has come in, but it is raining pretty bad. Now, I will tell you.
And John said that I shouldn't go out in the rain. I should go on Zoom. And I said, yes. He said, I'll see you on Zoom.
Yeah, it is raining pretty bad, but I had to come. I flew back just to be able to be here today. So there was no way that I wasn't going to come back. I literally landed at 5 o'clock and I was at Burbank and I'm going to be here. And there was a lot of traffic coming, but
John's on his way in.
he is, he's in, he's here safe. So we're making sure that he's
showing a lot of rain.
John wanted to know, but the people who are in Washington and Texas and all those other places, they would laugh at us. So I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna do?
The
I'm
next
gonna
15
turn down.
minutes.
1 second. You know what we'll do?
He says the people that were in Washington
Here.
State and other places are lying.
Yeah, we can't have you. You would laugh at us if we canceled because of the
Listen to
weather.
this. You'd
Right?
laugh at us if you canceled because of the weather. Yeah.
We can hear you, Sharon. Sharon, you're on. We can hear you. You're close enough.
We drove down to Southern Oregon
Yeah.
in the rain and snow last Friday. Yeah, last Friday.
Well.
With the chocolate festival in Ashland.
Oh, okay. That's worth it.
Sharon's got to get her chocolate.
Well, that sounds like a worthy journey.
The
I
what?
turned down the volume a
David,
little
is he
bit.
flying?
What?
I don't see David. Is he flying?
David, Cheryl, is David there?
Sorry, I was on mute.
No, it's okay.
No, David is out at the airport at a board meeting. So hopefully he'll be back shortly.
Good. I like seeing the two of you.
We get to
Yes,
see
ma'am.
you.
Thanks for asking.
So hopefully everyone has been doing okay, staying well. And again, for us, it's supposed to stop raining tonight, maybe even. That's what I said. Tomorrow.
Ours last night.
So it's supposed to get better, but we are getting inundated. It is a bad rain day. John was not being wimpy by asking us whether we were going to be here.
How is the 100 miles?
He doesn't care. Or over. He's not being tough anymore, he said. So, what was my hat? Oh, so my hat is a hat of a minor league team in it's Hudson Valley. I don't know why I'm looking at here. You know what I'll do? I'll just do it real quick. So I'll show people my hat.
Ah, I see a
So
hat.
this is my minor league. I have like a bunch of minor league hats now. So this is the Hudson Valley Renegades up in New York, up in Westchester. But I love these hats, and they're teams that nobody knows. And then they do these logos that are they call them Taco Tuesday logos. They're basically like Mexican heritage nights, and so their hats are even funnier and cooler and different for those. So I have a couple hats that I wear now. I don't know how it started. My daughter got me one. Yeah, she got me a Portland Sea Dog hat. Or I got her one. I don't remember. But anyways, it turned into a thing now. So you'll see me sometimes wearing minor league hats that nobody knows who they are. The Renegades.
So once again, you are unique.
Yeah, trying to be unique. And the only people wearing these hats. No, I think they're a Yankee affiliate. I know. I have a couple of Dodger ones. I have the OKC Dodgers, and I don't like the Tulsa Drillers one, so I didn't get that one. But I got the OKLA one, and then I wear that one occasionally. And then, but it's not a great hat. It's not very creative. And then I have another one that I love is Montgomery Biscuits, and it's actually it's a kimchi. They had a kimchi, so I have a kimchi hat. Nobody has a hat with kimchi, but normally their logo is a biscuit. So, anyways. But yeah, you'll see me occasionally now with these hats. Now, on Friday night, you can come in your cowboy hat to the services because Joe Buchanan will probably be wearing his cowboy hat. He's flying in literally on Friday, so I'm picking him up, and we're gonna bring him over for services on Friday. And what he's gonna be doing too is after Shabbat, we're gonna have a little kind of informal thing for a few minutes. He's gonna sing and do some songs that aren't necessarily like liturgical songs. They're not service songs, but some of the music that he wrote. And so while we're having oneg and stuff like that. So that part, I don't know if we can stream that, but we might try. We'll try, but there'll be a lot of people here. So please try to be here, watch it.
Really?
It's very special. Yeah. I don't know if it's Mike, it's not going to be like 200 people. So it's not going to be, but it'd be great if it was, but I don't think so. But the Signal ran a nice article about it, which was nice. We posted it up on the Facebook page. So if you look at the TBA Facebook page, you can see a link to it, or just go on the Signal, see the story. So, I will mention too, thinking of the Signal just made me think about it, but we will have, now that the primary's over, we will have different candidates coming here to introduce themselves and to say hi now that it's been whittled down to 2 people. And then remember, they don't have to both. Steve Garvey?
Huh?
Yeah, if he'll come. Steve Garvey. Mike just asked if I'm going to have Steve Garvey come. Why not? I'd have him come. I don't think he's coming, but I'll extend the invitation. You're right.
Excellent.
I will extend the invitation, and that means I'm going to extend the invitation to Shift too. But listen, well, we'll ask. I have to. You have to ask both. Don't have to. I think you have to. No, don't do it. John just said can't have that guy in it. But John got to meet John. Yeah, it's on to you. John got to meet one of the guys who did win yesterday or made it through, but he made it through as one of the candidates is Kip Muller, who was actually at High Holidays. I introduced him. Yeah, he helped John. He was even impressed that he helped him. But I don't think he voted for him. But I'm not going to ask him, but he did help him. John said he would maybe vote for him if he helped him move the ark. So Kip did move the ark, and he impressed John with his willingness to help. But Kip did make it through, and he's a nice guy, and I'm sure we'll have him. I introduced Kip at High Holidays because he was there davening with us. I said his website is JewishGuyWithTheMostGentile.com. But his name's Kip Muller, and he is legit. He grew up, his father, I think, converted, but he grew up in Sacramento, and he's a very nice guy, very nice young man. Don't invite guests. Well, you know what's interesting? About it? He is running against
over here.
But I wonder if I could get under that by inviting him just as a Jewish guy to services. Interesting, Mike.
Yeah, you could do that.
Interesting. Hockman. All right. Well, that's our little wrap up of the news, though. I don't remember what happened with the prop. Is that over with? I mean, like, were they yes or no, or do they come back on the ballot? They come back on the ballot next time. Oh,
What happened?
the ballot measures.
Did one pass?
I don't know. He just asked. I don't know. So anyways, we'll pay attention to that stuff. And the other thing we were going to say is that I mentioned yesterday, and Elise is on again for those who weren't with us for Tuesdays, to take a gander over at the article, "The Golden Age of American Jewry is Ending," the article in the Atlantic. So take a gander at that. See what you think. John read it. I don't know if anyone else has read it. Has anyone else read it yet? Okay, so you can have Mary read it to you. It's a long enough article that she could read it to you. But it is I'll just share it real quick so everybody can see it. But it is a great piece to at least talk about, and I will just pop it up so you can see it. And I mentioned that if you have Apple News, you can read it for free. But this is, Franklin Foer, the writer, put out the essential idea that after October 7th, which isn't like the date that it all changed, but that kind of made everyone in the Jewish community wake up to the reality that our golden age is over, the golden age of American Jewry, where we were giving back to America was giving to us, and that the feeling of American Jews was, this is the country for us. This is the most accepting country we could ever live in. And it's not like the other countries that we've lived in the past. So I think maybe he went a little extreme in some of these things, but there's definitely parts of this that you need to pay attention to. Even if you don't agree with the whole premise, I think it's worth looking at, discussing. There's a companion interview that one of the writers at the Atlantic interviewed him and talked to him about it. And as I mentioned on yesterday, that the Franklin's brother, this is Franklin right here.
Mm-hmm.
Franklin's brother, Jonathan is a novelist who wrote the book Everything is Illuminated, which was a movie with who was in that movie? Oh, the kid from what's his name? Not kid, the actor from The Lord of the Rings, the guy who played Frodo. That guy, he played the character in Everything is Illuminated, which is basically like Jonathan Safran Foer's character. Anyways, that guy. But his brother, Joshua, is the editor and the founder of this right here, Sepharia, the place that we're reading every week. So the four families, the three sons are quite illustrious and have all made some really nice contributions to American Jewry. And so last week we were reading the kind of towards the end, the last part of chapter 4. And we started talking about a little bit about heaven, or at least the world to come. And the part that we finished with was this idea that this part here, verse 16, Rabbi Yaakov said that this world is like a vestibule. It's like the entryway or the preparation room. It's the ante room, which was the word for it in Greek was prosdor, the front door, the entryway or vestibule for the world to come, because the next world is the world where the actual party is. Now, that's an interesting idea, which is that, again, this world is just a prep room for that. Now, it's important because you have to have that room to get into the next room, but that starts to give us a little bit of an indication of what the rabbis felt heaven was like, and what this world was like, and why this world and the next world are both important. Not that we should all be, for example, rushing off to the next world. And we're actually going to read a text today, I'm sure we'll get to it today, that kind of gives us a little bit of clarity on that. Not that it's exactly the same text, it's by a different rabbi, but from around the same period, but a little bit. It doesn't say buffet, it says a banquet. I guess you could say that it's all you can eat banquet too. But yes, it does sound really good. It says everything. We get to eat from these amazing, miraculous animals, by the way. And by the way, just so you know, there does seem to be this understanding that, like, in the world to come, everything is kosher. Because the animals that we eat are not animals that you'd, well, there's a sea animal that we eat, a bird, and a land animal that we eat. But it seems like, I don't know, I guess they could be koshered, but they do seem to almost be like representative that everything's on the table. But I'm not saying that that's exactly what they say, but there does seem to be an understanding that, like, in the next world, there's a lot more to eat. And even animals, like you said, that we can't even eat. Like, for example, the Leviathan is a mythic beast. We don't eat the Leviathan. We can't get the Leviathan. Whether or not it's kosher or not, I guess isn't you can't even get to it. But in the world to come, it's served for you. The ribs, yeah, on the Leviathan. Yeah, it's a big fish. That have to debone that. And the word Leviathan, is synonymous with a huge thing. And the behemoth, which is the big land animal, is behemoth. That's synonymous with, that word became something huge. It doesn't even, you could say that car is a behemoth, or that person is a behemoth, but the word behemoth in Hebrew is that giant land animal. Some people think it's a hippopotamus. Some people think it's not an elephant, because there's a Hebrew word for elephant, but some people think it was some kind of giant land animal. It might have even been a dinosaur. Yeah. That they were describing the fossils and stuff that they found. But anyways, that is part of the banquet. And that's what we read. That's where we left off. What? Why not? Why not? I understand, but the dinosaurs, if they found a huge fossilized bone, they would have said, well, that's a huge animal. Why? Do you wait a second? Do you believe that there's dragons? Because in Hebrew, one of the words that we have that could be translated, that's sometimes translated as dragon, some people think that described dinosaurs. Now, where do we even get this from? Because, yeah, we didn't live at the same time as dinosaurs. But some people think that either they found bones or there were surviving dinosaurs that somehow lived. And again, why don't we have their fossils? Because if there's only one or two, we're not going to necessarily have a fossil of it. But other people say that there's some kind of pre-human memory that all mammals have, that they almost didn't survive, and that they were at one point low down on the totem pole on beasts on this planet.
The only way that argument would work is if the author of
The Bible, yeah.
right, they didn't know anything prior to that,
And they couldn't explain it.
so they could. So obviously we found archaeological evidence. That'd be the only. So for those people that don't believe in evolution, only believe in creation. They can't explain that away. That'd be the only argument.
Yes. As I said before, I mean, it's not a problem for me because I don't believe the Bible was ever trying to explain creation. But, other than like telling you, we believe that human beings were created in the image of God, that we're given something different than animals have, which I don't know. I believe that. And I love animals. I don't eat animals. That's how much I love them. But I believe there's a difference between humans and animals. That doesn't mean that animals don't have feelings. I think they do. That's why I don't eat them. But I also think there's something different, that there's a spark of something that is different in a human being than it is in an animal. I'm sorry. I mean, I do believe that. And I think our ancestors believed that. But I also think they respected animals and they cared for animals. Clearly they did. They talk about it. Yeah. Yeah. There was definitely intention, as Mike is saying, to preserve the dignity and to lessen the pain for animals. We're going to get over. We're actually going to maybe even read something about that, if not today, then next week. But let's take a look at the next text. And I promise you, and John's also asked about the world to come, we're going to have a lot of it. And so the next line is actually the line that I told you we would get to, which is, he used to say, the same guy, Rabbi Jacob, look what he says about heaven here, or the world to come, I should say. More precious is 1 hour in repentance and good deeds in this world than all the life of the world to come. And more precious is 1 hour, the tranquility of the world to come, than all the life of this world. Now, that seems to be somewhat contradictory. And again, you could say that how could both of those statements logically be true? But there's an interesting thing that he tells us here, which is that there is something that we experience in this world that is so good that it actually is something we can't experience in the world to come. And so I kind of look at it like this, that these are the things that we experience in this world that we can't experience in the next world. And for that, there's a value for this world. So when he says that this world is a preparation, is an anteroom, there's things that we do in this room, in this place, that we can't do in the next world. And that is repentance and ma'asim tovim, doing good deeds. In heaven, we don't do those kind of things. We're not engaged in that kind of work. Maybe because in the world to come, we're at a different level where we're neither good nor bad, right? We're not really like, we're acting like angels, or we're in a world where good and bad no longer function the way they do here. Yeah. And there's a line, by the way, to go back to my favorite movie about this, there's a line in Defending Your Life where Rip Torn is asked by Albert Brooks, where were you? And he says, if I told you, you wouldn't be able to understand. And then he tells him, and he's like, I had no idea what you just tried to tell me. But it's a simple idea that, like, in the world to come, that we're not doing the same kinds of things, and therefore that we're not repenting because we're not doing anything that would cause us to repent. But what happens is when we go through repentance, the feeling that we have by being able to do that and to do good deeds is a feeling that we don't have in the world to come. And so that's why this world is actually filled with opportunities to have enjoyment and to have some feelings that are beyond even like just having fun, but really feeling like we're making a difference. And when we feel like we're making a difference, then that's a whole nother level of experience. Yes. I won't even say enjoyment, experience. It's an experience. And so he says that in the next world, there's tranquility. Well, that makes sense, because the tranquility that we feel, and I think what he's kind of saying is like the common feeling, or the baseline feeling that we have in the world to come is so wonderful, because we're not worried about food, we're not worried about our health, we're not thinking about money, we're not thinking about anything else that keeps us from having a tranquility and peace that in the next world our our baseline is so nice that there's nothing like that here. The
Mhm.
baseline level is, we can't even get to that here. So that's why the goodness of this kind of just the existence there, we can't find that in this world really. So there's stuff we have here that's really special. But again, in the next world, we don't have to worry about those kind of things. And that's, if you will, this is kind of the Jewish version of what heaven is like,
Mhm.
which is peace. It's not having to worry about the things that we worry about in this world. Yeah. And that's not really achievable in this world. But the good deeds and the repentance, the teshuvah that we can do here, the ability to feel like we've done something outside of ourselves that we didn't even expect we could do, that's a feeling that we don't have in the world to come. It's interesting. So that's a little bit. That will not be it for the world to come, I promise. There's more world to come. There's more to come in the world to come. So there's more to come. But look at this line. This one is getting back to the world that we live in. And I think there's some good stuff in here. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, "Do not try to appease your friend during his hour of anger, nor comfort him at the hour while his dead still lies before him, nor question him at the hour of his vow, nor strive to see him in his hour of disgrace." So again, this is kind of like a fourfold thing, like we had with, who is wise, who's strong. This is a fourfold one, and we're going to have a few fourfold ones here too. But this one's really interesting because it all has to do with our friends, right? It all has to do with the people. And it does say friend, but it's colleague. It could be also translated as peer, right? This is our peers. So look what it says here. And let's see whether you agree with this. Well, let me ask you a question. Let's look at the first one. This one, wow. This is a good one. It's a tough one. Especially if your chaver is your spouse. It's a really tough one if you live with the person. But this is definitely a good piece of advice for people who live in the same house.
Mhm.
It also could be siblings. Could also be
Your children?
people who live in the same house. Children, yeah. People who live in the same place where it's tough to find a space apart from them. But it's a great piece of advice.
Mhm.
Let people have a cooling off period. So much could be solved if people just said, you know what, let's wait maybe a couple hours before we have this discussion. And a lot of drama, a lot of violence, a lot of tough stuff could be fixed with simply giving people a cooling off period.
Mhm.
Some people can't do it. Some people have a real hard time just stepping out of the room and saying, you know what, this is too much anger right now, too much emotion. That having any rational discussion right now, any points of making logic or anything else, this is not the time. And so this is definitely a great piece of advice. And for anybody who, look, there's people who don't get angry. I'm not one of those people, but I definitely have learned to not write a letter or shoot an email off in the moment of my anger. So sometimes I compose it in my anger, or sometimes I even walk around saying it. Sometimes I'll go into the shower and start screaming it, but I do not do it. And so I've learned to not respond in anger. But it's not easy, but it's something that I don't think about as much now. I just know not to do it. But is a really good thing not to have also people bug you during those times. So it's tough because sometimes people will try. Sometimes people feel they're doing the right thing.
Mm-mm.
And if you have the wherewithal in that moment and you're in that anger, tell the person, I just can't talk about it now. That might work. Otherwise, you might have to leave. You might have to walk out for a little bit, cool off. Probably not get in the car, but maybe walk around. Not good to drive while you're that angry. But it's also important to know that when we have people who are angry and they are not in the mood to talk, leave them alone. It's a lot easier for us being in the calm situation to think rationally, which is why this is phrased in the way of talking to the person who isn't angry. Again, we got to do our part, not to get too angry and hopefully let people know when we're in that position. But if you're the person who's trying to comfort the person or, calm them down, maybe you give them a little time. So that could really help a lot of people, a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is an interesting one, right, Joyce? About talking to somebody when the dead person is still before them.
They're
This
not
is-
ready to hear.
This is a tough one because literally, of course, they're saying don't do it while the body isn't still in front of the person. But of course, sometimes it's not literally just that moment, right? Sometimes it takes weeks, if not months, to talk to somebody who is
Absolutely.
ready to talk. So it's our tradition to comfort the mourners, right? Comfort people who are mourning. But we have a very important tradition. When people say, what are you supposed to say to somebody at a Shiva? You're not supposed to say anything. You're not supposed to say, you'll get over it. You're not supposed to say, it could have been worse. You're not supposed to say,
Boy, that's not a good one.
well, at least they didn't suffer. People may want to hear that, but that may be really hard for them to hear.
Right.
While it comes from a place of people trying to comfort, trying to do something, the best thing that you can do is just be there for the person. Just put your arm around them if that's appropriate. Just stay there in front of them and say, I'm here for you if you need anything. But not necessarily. I have to tell you, sometimes people do the wrong thing just by asking questions.
Right.
And I want to tell you, I know people don't do it out of meanness or out of a lack of actual concern. But there are times when people, they don't want to talk about it and it hurts them to talk about it.
Yes. You're absolutely right.
Wait, wait, Mike is saying something. Yeah.
About that. Oh, I called to reschedule. You said, what happened? I said, my dad died. I said, how old was he? He's 84. Oh, he was an old guy anyways.
Oh,
I
geez.
said, don't.
Did everyone hear what Mike said? When
No,
Mike
we
told,
couldn't hear him.
so Mike said that when he had to speak to somebody, he had to cancel an appointment when his dad died, and the person asked him how old was his dad, and he said 84, and the guy said, well, he was an old guy anyways. Mike said,
Oh, God.
I don't want to see you. And that is not what somebody wants to hear when they're mourning. Now, even if he had said, well, he had a long life, that's not
A little better.
it's not really. It's
really not better.
The Jewish tradition that is an interesting one that isn't so popular here, but it's very popular in England. It's an interesting one. In England, you know what they say to people at a funeral after you comfort them when you come to a mourner's house. You know what you say to them? No, you don't say let's eat. Mike said let's eat. Where's the Brents, right, John? Is this where the Brents is? It's the thing you're supposed to say. Very simple words, and they say it in England and like all the places, Australia. This is what they say: "I wish you long life." You say that to the mourner. I wish you long life to the mourner. which is an interesting thing because it has nothing to do with the person who died, but you're
Mhm.
basically saying, I wish you long life. I wish you a long life. It's a weird thing, but if you think about it, it really takes if you want to say something nice to the person who died with an affirmation that we hope you live a long time. Now, again, it's not what I say. It's not my tradition. It's not something that, but I get it. And it actually, when I hear it, I'm like, as soon as I hear somebody say it, I say, oh, that person's English, because it's a very English thing to say, but that's what they say. I wish you long life. So, this is a very tough thing, especially like today I found out someone's grandparent died and had a long life, but the tradition, that I followed by saying it in Hebrew, but because the person was actually a rabbi, I said, may she be remembered for a blessing, which is another way of and that's the traditional Jewish thing we say, is that. Now, the interesting thing is from a Jewish standpoint, when the person dies, what was traditionally said, and it's still said, like if you see an announcement that goes out in a traditional synagogue, we don't do this. We say ours are sad news, right? But which, by the way, they get open more than the other ones. Sad news have the highest open rate of any of our e-blasts.
Really?
Yeah, it's true. But in Orthodox and more traditional communities, not just Orthodox, but more traditional communities, the tradition of what we say when we announce someone that died, Baruch Dayan HaEmet. You'll see that written out, BDH, which is the Baruch Dayan HaEmet. That's the transliteration of that, or BDE, Baruch Dayan Emet. And it literally means blessed is the judge of truth, which is what you were supposed to say when somebody died. Now, we don't say that because it doesn't seem very nice. It seems like we say, well, it's God's will, right? It's basically saying God decided that this is the end of the person's life. Now, the acceptance of that was obviously what you're saying in a humble way, is it's beyond our control. But a lot of people don't say that anymore. The one time that we say that in the non-Orthodox world, at least when I say it, is the blessing that we say when we cut the Kriya ribbon, which is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan HaEmet. Blessed are you, God, Lord of the ruler of the universe, who judges in truth. Now, what I normally translate it as, blessed are you, God, giver of life, who judges us in truth. Because I remind people that God also gave us the life, right? So by saying Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, that's all God, the source of the universe, the source of life, that's the where the life came from in the first place. So I affirm that as I tell people, God judges us in truth, which doesn't necessarily mean God decided this is the day I'm going to die, but that God said this person lived a good life. Hopefully that's the truth. Now, this is, and we're going to get to that, by the way, that issue in particular, which, by the way, we already had, by the way. For those who weren't with us last week, just want to say this. It said last week, it is not on our hands to explain the reason either of the security of the wicked or even the afflictions of the righteous. So when we talk about why did this person die or why did this person suffer and they were such a good person, we can't explain it. And so the Baruch Dayan HaEmet essentially says, I can't explain it. I have no answer. I don't have an answer. So we're not supposed to comfort people at the moment the person died, right? While the person's there, which I would say in extension is you have to give people time to process, and you say what you believe is right in that moment. Maybe you make a mistake, maybe not, but always err on the side of giving people space and basically saying to them in a nice way, I'm here for you if you need anything. I'm sorry. If there's anything I can do. That's what you say. Right? Yeah. Mary's saying when she oriented a new chaplain to the hospice.
Family wanted the chaplain to come at the time of death.
Mhm.
So they did the connect. And he says, what do I say to that? And I said, you don't need to say anything. Just listen.
Yeah.
Just think of it as a ministry presence.
So Mary said, when the guy said you didn't have to, I assume it's a guy.
Yep.
He said, when he asked, what do I say? She said, you don't have to say anything, you just listen. And that's really, again, what we do. Yeah.
Right.
We're all thinking.
Yeah. You just basically, you basically just listen. You don't have to say anything, right? But here, again, there's also this understanding that when people have just suffered a loss, this is not like, if people want me to be there, I'll be there. And then sometimes I'm there because they said, we really want you to be there in this moment. But otherwise, I give people their space.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Mary? You got to give them their space. And don't be in their face, that's for sure. You know, be there, hover around there, but don't get in their face. They don't need that. They don't need you to. And some people do it out of, they want to help, but you know, sometimes the most you can do is just be there, be a presence, and in some cases leave. When it's your time to leave, leave. But I will tell you that this instinct that people say, like, what happened? Look, we all have a curiosity, right? We all want to know what happened. It's just innate. I want to know, but it's not, sometimes it's a very bad question.
Yes.
And that is a question you shouldn't ask. Yeah. Can't ask. You want to, I know, it's human instinct, but you can't do it. It's an instinct, you want to say it, believe me, I have the same thing. I don't know what happened. But you don't ask the mourners. If you want to talk to the doctor, they're not supposed to tell you anymore. It's a HIPAA violation. But, you know, believe me, there are times when I'm like, what the heck happened here? Gotta know. I can never ask. They want to tell me, yeah, but I don't ask.
You don't even.
Nope, nope. If they tell me, and I want to know, I'm like every other human being. I want to know what happened, but I don't. And yeah, I mean, especially if some cases, you know, I don't really know the people that well. And then they tell me, you know, you got to come in and do that. You know, occasionally I'll get asked by the hospital to come, and I never even know the person. But it's a tough one because I am like everybody else. I want to know. I'm curious, but it's not right. So, by the way, sometimes the doctors, they don't follow the rules. They don't, I mean, not that that doesn't happen all the time, but I just want to tell you, they don't always follow. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. So the next one is, don't question a person at their hour of vow when they're making a vow. Now that's not something, and that's the word again, neder, like kol nidre, their vow. When people make vows, this was a serious deal, and the rabbis definitely don't want people making vows, but if they're making them, this is not the time while they're making them to ask them about it. You can ask them about it maybe at another time, but not while they're in the process of making that vow. Don't do it. We don't do it a lot anymore. I mean, like the rabbis didn't want us to do it. We've pretty much stopped doing it, but people used to do it a lot. I'm not saying that people don't do it ever. There are people who say, you know, I swear to, you know, God, if you'll do this for me, I'll do that. But people, if they do it, they generally don't talk about it. There was a time and a place and a time in Jewish history. We know about the Nazarites. We've talked about Nazarite vows. We've talked about other vows that are mentioned in the Torah where people would kind of vow that they weren't going to be married and those kind of vows. People did it a lot more. We were discouraged from doing it, and now we've gotten to a point where it's pretty much not a thing that people do a lot. Now, partly it's because we're not supposed to do it, but also partly it's because I don't know that people feel that theologically it makes a lot of sense to do it, but people do it sometimes. You may have done it before, but we're not supposed to do it. And when people question us about it, it is an uncomfortable moment they're assuming and not supposed to do it. The last one here makes a lot of sense, which, wow, I don't know what to say about this. Other than we're shockingly violating this almost every day in our culture. But looking at people when they're going through humiliation, I am so disheartened by the level that this happens in our society. Yeah, I hate it, and our culture actually celebrates it, and it's one of the reasons why I can't watch shows where they judge people or they set people up for humiliation, which includes, and it doesn't happen as much on those shows, but they used to do it, and they did it to somebody that I know and many of you know, where they humiliate people on those shows like The Voice or America's Got Talent and American Idol, and they make fun of people. And I find it, I won't watch those things at all. But making fun of people, in some cases, people went along with it and they're party to it. But I think it's terrible, and I think encouraging people to disgrace themselves, even if they go along with it, is bad for society. There's no reason to encourage people to be embarrassed, and so this happens all the time. And to some extent, social media has only enhanced it and made it so that people will watch, videos of people humiliating themselves and humiliating others. And it's just, to me, it's like, it's society. It's gone completely off the deep end on this. And again, I know people say there's other stuff that's worse that is happening. I think it's part of the same mentality, which is that people are in other people's business at a level that I mean, like, people take it for granted now that they're going to expose themselves and be part of this. And some people, they're okay with it because they want to have attention, but it's such a sick cycle. And it really concerns me that we have a society that has given up the ability to have any sense of shame and sense of decorum and sense of providing compassion for people, because we've essentially created a society that humiliates people. So the word disgrace, again, providing grace for people and having people have grace, which isn't, we sometimes think of grace as like, somebody is graceful and that they are like a ballet dancer. Grace is really giving people the benefit of the doubt, and it's giving them the option of, or the default option of being okay. And disgracing somebody is doing the exact opposite. So if we're encouraging people in our society to humiliate people, then we shouldn't be surprised that that's what people want to see. They want to see more of it, and they want it to happen to everybody. And so, we've done that to celebrities, where we set them up for embarrassment and for disgrace, because it feeds the cycle of building people up and then tearing them down. And it's very disappointing, and it's very sad. And it seems like it's just getting worse. So all I can tell you is this line seems so quaint and irrelevant now, that it's shocking that in my lifetime, I've witnessed this happen. And it's very upsetting. To me, it's one of the worst things. I don't like people being judged. I don't like people being humiliated. I don't find it funny. I don't find it entertaining. I never like beauty pageants or anything where people get judged. I don't like it. And I really don't like it when people use that as an opportunity to make fun of people and humiliate people. Didn't like it as a kid. I didn't like it when they did it on the Gong Show when I was a kid. I mean, I know it was all part of the entertainment and whatever, but there was something that was so, like, some people seemed like they were in on the joke and some people didn't seem like they're, and it just crushed me that people were laughed at. That's like the worst thing that I can see almost, I don't want to see violence. I don't want to see I don't want to see any kind of humiliation or bad stuff, but watching someone get humiliated to me is more painful than almost anything. I don't know. It just really, really bothers me. And it's a Jewish value of saying people have a certain dignity. They're afforded a certain dignity. We said even criminals are afforded a certain dignity in our culture of not humiliating them. Even the dead bodies of victims of war in our culture, we bury them. We don't drag them through streets. And the lack of value that we put on a human being, these things they're part of the same mentality of not afford people a certain level of decency, even people we don't like. So those 4 things that he lays out are like, they're basic levels of humanity and creating a society that could be it could be so much better if we just did those 4 things on a daily basis. So it's a very powerful set of kind of ethical behaviors and basic ways we treat people. This one kind of goes with it. This one from Shmuel HaKatan, which again means Shmuel the little guy. He's the little guy, Shmuel HaKatan. I don't know if he liked that name, but he's the little one. It also, by the way, could be there was Shmuel HaGadol, who was just really well known and just wasn't as well known, but could also have been just a shorter guy. He said, if your enemy falls, do not exult. If he trips, let your heart not rejoice, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and avert his wrath from him. Well, that's a weird line. And of course, they quote the Bible. They quote the book of Proverbs, which you can see. If you look at the book of Proverbs, it's actually a quote. So for those of us who are reading on Tuesdays, we're going to get to this text of the book of Proverbs, which is filled with wisdom, just like we're reading now. This one actually quotes it. So this is not usual. Most of the reading that we've done has been the rabbis, even if they've quoted a text, they have something to say that's not the text. Shmuel HaKatan just plagiarized the Bible. He just took the book of Proverbs. Maybe that was why he was called Little Samuel, but I don't know. But he literally just quoted the Bible. Now, it's a great text. I mean, it's one that reminds us that, again, in our Jewish tradition, that even when our enemies fall, we don't rejoice. Now, it's natural to want to rejoice. That's why we have to hold ourselves back, but we don't rejoice. We don't show signs that this is a party when we watch people fail. And when our enemies are destroyed. This is an interesting one because the word that's used here is enemy. It's not the person we don't like. An enemy could be somebody even in battle. And this is definitely something that's come up in the last few months, as people have said. And by the way, you'll see my label got ripped today, got wet, and then it ripped on the way here as I was coming out. But as thinking about what's happening in Israel, an interesting thing came up the other day. My daughter, and it's weird, Rachel's 27, thinking about your son's ages. If they were living in Israel, they'd be fighting right now, right? And they'd be in battle. So Rachel, who's pretty far removed from battle, I can never even imagine my daughter in combat. Not that one, the other two for sure, but Rachel not so much. She would not be. She would not. She's not even so much in the nails, but yes, she would step on something or whatever. She's also very accident prone, so it would not be good. But by her own admission, she said this would not. But she has friends in Israel, some of the people that she's known from school and from camp who are serving right now. And she showed me some of the pictures that one of her friends posted. And she said to me, she said, Dad, she said, I don't like this picture, the couple of these pictures that is a guy that she's friends with in Israel. She says, I don't like a couple of these pictures that he posted. It looks like he's a little too happy. And there was like 4 or 5 pictures, and like 2 of them, I could kind of see it. And she actually picked up on it because she said, you know, you shouldn't be posting pictures like that. I said, you're probably right, Rachel. I said, but you know, and I'm making an excuse for him, but it wasn't horrible. I just want to say, it's not like he's standing over a body and, you know, smiling or something. It wasn't that at all. But, you know, he's kind of smiling in one of the pictures, and there's another picture where it looks like one picture, he's blown up tunnels and you see explosions. And there's nobody in the picture. I mean, he's not even saying, I blew up a person in the tunnel. He's saying, we're destroying these tunnels where there are weapons. So, and he's kind of, you know, putting a thumbs up on it. But she was upset by it because she knows that our Jewish values are this: you don't exalt. And she was right in kind of saying this is probably not a good thing. That maybe went a little too far. And it is one of the reasons why Israel has a challenge. America's had a challenge in the last couple of decades since phones became part of our lives. Little cameras on them. That people are taking pictures that they shouldn't be taking pictures of, and not always using their best judgment. And sometimes 25, 27-year-old kids take pictures that they shouldn't take pictures of.
That's not,
What?
the issue is not the picture. It doesn't, when this was written, there were no pictures.
No, but people sang about it and wrote about it.
Picture's not the issue.
What?
The fact of the act, that's what she was upset about. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
documented by a picture.
Yeah.
But it could just be documented in real life.
Yeah.
Now, one thing.
Now, wait, well, hold it a second. But in the moment, this is what I told her. That in the moment that this guy just did what he did, look, you don't know if 2 of his friends got killed the day before. And he's like, we did something today. It's hard for us to get in that mindset, which was my excuse for it. But all I'm saying is, if he didn't have the camera, he wouldn't have he wouldn't have had the opportunity to take that picture. And maybe he would have thought of, like, maybe it would have, now he also posted it, which he didn't have to do either. But it's hard. And as I said to Rachel, I said, it's hard for you to understand it where you are now, why he seems like he's celebrating more in those pictures, because he's in the midst of combat right now. But man, it's a tough one. And the more accessible these cameras are, the harder it's been. And it's not just in Israel. I mean, we had this problem in America. Everyone remembers the pictures from Abu Ghraib. I mean, we didn't want to know that was happening, and we definitely didn't want to see it. And it made a lot of people very uncomfortable to know that this is happening. It was happening, and that was a problem. John's point is the fact that it happens is a problem. And I agree.
No, no. What I was saying is twofold. One, the picture memorialized his emotions at the moment.
Yeah.
Not being in the situation of your daughter's friend, I can only say that, and it doesn't need to be combat, it could be any other confrontation that you're with. You're a little, you know, what he's saying is you have to take the high road.
Yeah.
But in a, I can't imagine, but in a situation of life and death, right? And you come on top, your emotions, your adrenaline, the whole thing, very difficult to control those.
Yeah, yes. What John's saying is, in the moment, it's very hard not to do that. The text you can see from Proverbs is all here, which is that there also seems to be this understanding that when they're getting punished, that God had that for them. That was God giving them his wrath, right? And there's this understanding that if you celebrate it too much, maybe the punishment comes down a little bit. So there's this weird dynamic that you want to celebrate, you're doing it at the expense that the wrath is actually, let God finish the wrath. Let God do the punishing. Your cheering it on doesn't help the situation. And it's a weird idea, but it's one that actually helps us retain our humanity in this, because it's very hard to. There's a wonderful midrash, which we've shared many times, but it's the example of this par excellence. The very famous text that says, when the Israel crossed the Sea of Reeds, right? And they crossed over, and when they crossed over, the Egyptians got washed away, right? All the Egyptians, all the horsemen, all the chariots got washed away. Pharaoh's army got drowned. And it says in the Midrash that the angels started singing along with the people. We were singing Mi Chamocha. We were singing and dancing. Now, God understands why we're singing and dancing. God gets it, because these people had been persecuting us for the last several hundred years, killing us, an act of genocide to try to keep us from procreating, to killed our babies. So we were singing and dancing that's over, right? So God lets us sing and dance. But God turns to the angels who are singing and dancing too with us, and God tells them to stop. God says, stop singing and dancing. My creations are being washed away. Now, that midrash was written by us, right? That's an explanation that we had. But it puts into God's mouth the fact that we don't celebrate when people die. Because what happens is that that taking away their humanity reduces our humanity. And that's where, as much as we want the current perpetrators of violence and murder against us to be punished, we don't celebrate and look at the death total and go, well, another 1,000 people got killed in the last couple of weeks. That's great. We don't do that. We're not looking at the numbers and going, that's great. Look, when I was a kid, and I've never served in combat, so I have no right to even, talk about it today from the standpoint of I've never been in a situation where I would take someone's life in battle. But when I was a kid, I used to read about Israel's battles. I had all these books on Israel's, I still have them, but I used to read about the 6-Day War, and I used to read about Yom Kippur War, and I would read about how many Israeli soldiers died and how many Arab armies died. And I would go, you see that? I would show it to whoever was nearby. You see this? 200 Israelis died and 3,000 Syrians died. And whatever the numbers were, it would be 15 to 20 to 1. And I'd show that to people. And I was like, look at that. But I never thought, hey, those 3,000 Syrian people were people. They were people who had lives, who could have maybe they could have done something nice. They had a kid who loved them, who lost a dad. I never thought about that when I was a kid. I just saw the numbers and said, wow, look at all those people that died.
There were people that wanted Jews dead.
John, I agree with you. That's why they had to be taken out of the world. But it's not something we celebrate, right? It's not something we go, well, that's wonderful. We killed people today, or we killed people 50 years ago, and let's celebrate. The Jewish value is that we can't lose, because that's what we're fighting for, is this idea that we don't celebrate when these people die. On the other hand, those people are. And for that's why we're having a war, because we have a different set of values, and both peoples can't live in the same land. So when people say to me, well, how does this war end? Well, when people who celebrate our destruction, our death, the murder of children are no longer a threat to us, then we'll have peace. I know that sounds like a simple answer, but that's what it comes down to. When we have peace with 75 years ago, 80 years ago, when we were fighting the Germans, we were fighting a war with different sets of values. Today, we look at the German people and American people, and the idea of us fighting against each other is unheard of, because we have similar values today. We wouldn't celebrate, and we wouldn't, if we were in a war, neither one of us would be happy with the fact that we killed people. That's the kind of world that we have to create. And that's what Judaism is told us 2,000 years ago, not to celebrate the death of even our enemies. And hopefully we won't give up on that. And as long as we have these texts, we won't give up on it. So we don't celebrate, we don't pass out candy when our enemies die. And unfortunately, our enemies, no, but our enemies, that's what makes them different. That's why they can do what they do. That's why they can celebrate, because they have a different set of values. So that has to stop. There can't be peace until that stops. And that's the famous line from Golda Meir, whose word should also be in Pirke Avot. One day we may forgive you for killing our children, but not for turning our children into killers. So this is the world that the values of what Golda Meir talked about after, in 1970s. So, yeah. So that line really is a quote from Proverbs, but even if you're not going to be with us for Proverbs, you got to read a little Proverbs. But that's a line. Now, this next text is a little bit less heavy, but it's still a good one. And it's actually pretty relevant for all of us. It's not that the last one wasn't, because the last one is very relevant for us right now, which is not to go home and celebrate after we read about, listen, I read the news constantly about what's happening from Israel. If I go for a couple hours to read it, it's amazing if I have gone or 2 or 3 hours. I'm checking the news from Israel more than I'm eating. When I eat a lot, I'm eating too much as it is too, but I'm checking the news from Israel constantly because I want to see what's happening, and I feel like I need to know. But I'm not celebrating, that's for sure. When we're reading about Israel's, we hope, continuous, and reading articles about it today about, what does the victory look like for Israel on this? But it's not one that we celebrate. There's not going to be any celebration in Israel when this war is over. I promise you that. So the next one's less heavy in the sense, it doesn't talk about life and death, though it does talk about things for us to think about, especially tonight. So here's this text from Elisha ben Abuya. Who was Elisha ben Abuya? For those who remember, this is the dude that became Acher. This is the guy who was Rabbi Akiva's friend, who became an apostate. So Elisha ben Abuya ended up becoming a heretic. We don't exactly know what kind of heretic he was, whether he became an atheist, whether he became a Christian, because this was 140, he could have become a Christian. He could have, again, become more of a Greek or Roman adherent. We don't know, but he became Acher. But here he's used his name, Elisha ben Abuya. So he was capable of saying some pretty powerful things. This one is an interesting one for us to think about. He who learns when a child, to what is he compared? To ink written upon a new writing sheet. And he who learns when an old man, to what is he compared? To ink written on a rubbed writing sheet. Now, when we look at a new writing sheet that hasn't been wiped off, it looks fresh. Well, that kind of makes sense. The one that's been rubbed off, that's going to be a little bit more weathered. It's going to be a little bit more it's going to look used. But by the way, that doesn't mean that it's not something that is beautiful in its own way. Now, you may say to yourself, what are you talking about? A new writing sheet and then a sheet that's been written on? Yes. In the ancient world, parchment was so hard to come by that if somebody wrote something and then they weren't happy with what was there, or they didn't value what was on that sheet anymore, they would rub it off. How do we know that? Well, first of all, he just said that. But it also is the case that we found parchment where we see words that are written underneath that. That's right. So we found text where we've actually now, because we have infrared and amazing technology, we can actually see what was written on the text on the thing before. Yeah. So we find scrolls and we like say, oh, wow. So on some of even the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found things underneath the scrolls. Texts maybe that were not seen as valuable enough. Maybe they were normal kinds of letters that people wrote. And then they said, well, we need this parchment to write a holy text. So let's wipe it off. So there is something to be said for a fresh sheet of paper. That's what you say a blank slate. There's something fresh about that. There's also something nice about looking at a paper that has been weathered, that's been rubbed, that has some sheen to it, some color to it. There is something like that too. So, it's now connected to what we're about to read. Who's a different writer, but he's saying some similar things about when people learn. So here's Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda. He was a man of Kfar Hababli, which, by the way, it means Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda. We know, first of all, his name, but it also says that he was from Kfar Habavli, which means the village of the Babylonians. Why was there a place called the village of the Babylonians in Israel? Well, it tells us that there were groups of people that lived in Babylonia, that lived in the east, who moved back to Israel. So during the Babylonian exile, Jews came back to the land of Israel. They came back to Judah, but they didn't stop coming back. And there were places where people continued to migrate from the east back to Israel. And at least one of those places was called Kfar Hababli. We know one of the people who was part of that Babylonian Jewish community who came back to Israel, not during the time of Ezra, but during his own life. During his life, he moved, was Hillel. It says that Hillel was born in Babylonia, and then he moved to Israel. So there were people going back and forth that were living in Israel who weren't born there. But there was a town called that, Kfar Hababli, the Babylonian town, the Babylonian village. So here's what he says. He who learns from the young, right? To what is he compared? To one who eats unripe grapes and drinks wine from his vat. And he who learns from the old, to what is he compared? To one who eats ripe grapes, and drinks old wine. So the next set of lines actually seems to be saying that people who at least are teaching from a young age, they may not be getting the best wine. That it actually takes time for a teacher to age, just like wine, just like grapes. Grapes themselves can be picked too early, and wine needs to age. So there's something to be said for learning from older people. Now, that doesn't mean that young people didn't have stuff that they could teach. Well, clearly, in those days, even people would sometimes have teachers who were young. But there is this understanding that older people would have something to teach you. So the previous thing seems to say, well, there's a certain freshness to learning when you're young, at least. That wasn't teaching, but that was learning. So that one was learning. This one is teaching. But this one seems to be saying that maybe the older stuff is better, at least when it comes to teaching. But the next one, which this one comes from Rabbi, just when it just says Rabbi, that's Rabbi Judah Hanasi, who's the editor and the compiler, the descendant of Hillel, who edited the Mishnah. So he's the one who kind of edited this book together. And Judah Hanasi said, Rabbi said, don't look at the container, but at that which is in it. There is a new container full of old wine and an old container in which there is not even new wine, meaning it's still just grape juice. So sometimes, right, you can't judge a book by its cover. Just because somebody is old doesn't mean they necessarily have it. So what's interesting about it is the last set of texts kind of says, you really can't judge. You really don't know. Be careful. don't look at don't look at the outer part of it. And this idea, by the way, this phrase that there is old wine in a new container is a wonderful metaphor that's been used in the Jewish community for a long time. So it's definitely kind of implies that there are people, younger people, who have an old soul. They have older wisdom, right? And so they have that. And those people are out there, right? There's places or people, there's places you can be and places you can learn where the old wine is in the new container. So it's with a younger people. But there's also this understanding that it also can apply to technology and communities, which on the face of them, they're very new, very modern, very progressive, maybe highly technologically advanced. But within them, there is this old wisdom. So we can't be 100% sure that the things that we see, even though we think that they're pretty technologically advanced, they aren't, they don't have this. It's interesting because I spent the morning today with a Chabad rabbi who's a little younger than me, and he was in the Scottsdale area. And I thought I was pretty proficient at technology. This guy was we were doing a little PowerPoint presentation about JLTV and about the network and stuff like that. And this guy knew how to use all the technology. And what was interesting is that not every Chabad rabbi can, but there are a lot who do now, because they understand that the technology, that what computers and the internet can do, what video editing can do, is deliver a message. Graphic art can do. I mean, Chabad has some fantastic stuff that they do. What they also do, by the way, is they share it amongst all their communities. So they have a whole organization that does the mailers, because people say, how does Chabad put out this beautiful email? Because they're using a template that was created by a team of graphic artists. And you see these guys, they're all Orthodox, they're all Chabad people. And these are not people that are like, they didn't bring in a bunch of secular folk that know how to use technology. They've learned how to use the technology, and they're using it effectively. And it's not just Chabad, it's Esha Torah. There's a lot of Jewish organizations that are traditionally based, Torah-based, Orthodox, whatever you want to say, people who wouldn't, you'd think, be engaged in technology, but they do believe this line that we just read. They'll quote this line, which is that don't look at the container, look at what's inside the container. Because what's on this page, what we're doing in Safari right now, what we're doing by being able to put this out on Zoom and connect people all around the world, this is what we're doing right now. For the first time in Jewish history, we're able to share these things and we're able to use technology to bring life, in this case, to texts that are over 2,000 years old. So it's an amazing time we live in when we think about this. So I would say that not only is this a golden age for Jewish people in America, but this is a golden age for Judaism across the world, because there are people around the world that are connecting to Judaism. I have a meeting tomorrow with another person who's converting, who has a whole very different kind of backstory. We're going to have Joe Buchanan here at services on Friday, who learned and embraced Judaism from his community in Houston, who came from a very Gentile background. Having the internet and having the ability to connect people who are very far removed geographically from other established Jewish communities has done stuff that we could never have imagined. I mean, I know for a fact that when we look at some of the metrics, we look at some of the stuff here from the temple, or even more so from JLTV, which is broadcasting all over the place, to see how many people are watching in Turkey or in the Emirates or in Malaysia. I mean, these are places in some cases that have no Jews. Indonesia. This is unbelievable what's happening. It's not again, a guarantee that we're going to have peace and we're going to have understanding or anything else like that. But the fact that this information is out there, it's really unbelievable. And it has a tremendous potential. The fact that people can now study the Talmud anywhere in the world was unheard of 35, 40 years ago, maybe in most cases 20 years ago. So this is really quite amazing. So we don't look at the container. Might be new, might be coming in a very ultra modern computer, but it is very, very wonderful wine, to use the imagery that they used, which is good stuff. Even if you don't like wine, understand the metaphor. Old wine was good wine back then. It is today too, usually. Let's look at the next line. These this one shorter section, and then Rabbi Elazar Hakapar. He said, envy, lust, and honor. We put in parentheses or in brackets, the desire for honor, put a man out of the world. But the words are literally kin'ah, hatava, and kavod. Now, kavod, usually we think honor, like why would anyone not want to have honor? And that's why they put in parentheses, in the brackets, the desire for honor. Not honor that was necessarily deserved, but just wanting to be honored. But you can understand what he's saying here, which is that these are the things that take us from living the kind of life that we're supposed to have, taking us, as it says here, putting a person out of the world. Now, it doesn't say the world to come, though some people have interpreted it that way, but it also could be understood that it even takes us out of this world. So it doesn't say specifically Olam Haba versus Olam Hazeh, this world, but there is this understanding that that is the path that leads us out of where we're supposed to be, either now or later, or maybe both. And that's why it doesn't say Olam Haba. But there does seem to be this understanding, again, that these three things, envy, lust, and the desire for honor or pursuit of honor, that's not what we're supposed to be looking for. Interestingly, by the way, it doesn't say wealth, it doesn't say money, though you could say that that's envy if you're just trying to get stuff. But it doesn't say money, it doesn't say happiness, it doesn't say things that you'd think could also, like if you were trying to get people to only focus on studies and learning, it doesn't say that. But it does say those things. It doesn't say, by the way, sexual desire, but it does say lust. And the understanding of lust is it's sexual desire for things that are not your mate. So those three things take us out of the world. And then it says, in his longer text, he also said, he would say, this is a tough one, but we're going to have a chance to think about it. He used to say, the ones who were born are to die, and the ones who have died are to be brought to life, and the ones who are brought to life are to be judged, so that one may know, make known, and have the knowledge that he is God. He is the designer, he is the creator, he is the discerner, he is the judge, he the witness, he the complainant, and he will summon to judgment. Blessed be he before whom there is no iniquity, nor forgetting, nor respect of persons, nor taking of bribes, for all are his. And know that all is according to the reckoning. And let not your impulse assure thee that the grave is a place of refuge for you, for against your will you were formed. I was going to read this part after, but it's too connected. Against your will were you born. Against your will you live. Against your will you die. And against your will that you will give an account and reckoning before the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed be he, the King of Kings, right? Not just two kings, but three kings. The Holy One, blessed be he. Well, because by that point they were talking about the Shah and Shah, by the way. That's the King of Kings. That was what the Persians called their king, the Shah and Shah. But they still called the Shah that, the Shah and Shah. But no, this is, can't get higher. Three kings. King of Kings. King of Kings. Yeah, he couldn't be. He doesn't have no three kings. Actually, he probably is. But he's like the king of Great Britain, the Orient, and whatever other kings he is. But anyways, yeah, this is a great one because there's a lot here to think about. But again, understanding our place, God's place. So understanding that God is the judge, right? God is the judge and knows everything. And unlike most judges, he doesn't need witnesses because he's the witness. He saw it. God knows what we did and is the complainant because we did it to God. And God's the prosecutor. You're like looking around going, oh no, God is everywhere in this. God's there too. God's the one telling the judge, who's also God, look what he did. He knew what he was doing. Yeah, that's true. He is. He is. But he is the discerner. So this idea that God is going to hold us to account, that's obvious. We know that. Talk about it every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that this is God's doing. But what's interesting about this is again the introduction to this, which is you're born, and if you're born, you're going to die.
That makes sense.
Well, the next part is that once you die, you're also going to be brought back to life, whether you like it or not. So all of this is the plan, right? The plan is that you're born, you die, you're brought back to life. But when you're brought back to life, you're also judged. And the reason for this cycle, if you will, is because God is God and God does this. And God has given us the ability to live a life and then be held to account for that life. This is all part of the plan because God isn't just the creator, God's also the witness to everything that we've done. That God has been there with us while we've been doing all the stuff we've been doing. And there's no escaping that reckoning. That's going to happen. And so what's interesting about this is the ending, which reaffirms this. That's why you have to read the whole thing together. When you die, don't think that the things you did in this world, it dies with you. The reckoning happens after you die. You're held to account for that. It's not that the grave is a refuge, right? It's not a place where you can hide. And what's interesting, of course, is this idea that it doesn't matter what you want. You may never have wanted to be born. It doesn't matter. You never wanted to die. It really doesn't matter. And it also doesn't matter that you really don't want to be held accountable for it, but you will. So what's interesting about this is that the idea that when we die, it's all over, they don't believe that. It doesn't say what the punishment is. I just want you to know. We don't get that. A little bit in the Talmud, there are some descriptions of damnation, if you will, or punishment for the really, really wicked people. But there is this understanding that there is an accounting for it. So when we talk about where does this even come from, it comes from a point where, again, not all Jews used to believe this. By the time the rabbis are writing this in the Talmud, though, the temple's already destroyed, which means the Sadducees and their repudiation of that idea of life after death, if it wasn't gone, it had definitely diminished quite a bit because they were done. Their system was over. So if not every Jew believed in heaven, a lot of the people and an afterlife, a lot of people did, and the Jewish answers of what happens when you die are based on this idea that God's in control of it. What's interesting, of course, is that I want to point out, so we said before, we've said it on Tuesdays quite a lot, not everybody believed that. There were a lot of people that were believing that when you died, you weren't part of that God anymore. You now reported to the other God. You are now in Hades' world. And in Hades, people were scared of Hades. But he was a different God. Now, people, of course, later equated Hades with the devil because paganism was the devil. Paganism, everything that pagans believed was evil. And so the gods became devils, demons. But remember something, the word demon does not mean devil. In Greek, a daemon is a entity, that's a divine entity. It isn't, if you told somebody in Greece or Rome 2,000 years ago, do they believe in demons? They'd say, yes, demons, those are gods. But the word demon became only devils. It was not what the meaning of the word originally was. And all of the gods took on all the pagan gods became evil. Judaism didn't have to incorporate them. The most powerful ancient deity throughout the ancient Near East and a lot of Europe was Pan. Pan was a satyr. He had cloven hooves, he had goat feet, and he had horns. He became the devil. The depictions of the devil were based on the pictures of Pan, the god Pan. He wasn't the devil. He was the most powerful shepherd god that people loved because he played music and he chased after beautiful women. And he was like the god of nature. People loved Pan, but then he became bad. He became the devil. He became the origin of the word panic. But it wasn't originally that way. But we didn't have to do that. We didn't have to incorporate or reappropriate or recontextualize these pagan gods, but they did, and they did. We didn't do that. We didn't say that there's a different God, a devil that's in charge of hell. It goes against, I'm only telling you this because we live in a culture where our visions of the afterlife have been shaped by Christianity, which was shaped by paganism, and the whole system was something that wasn't really our system. So when our ancestors, up until a few hundred years ago, who had very little connection, they had some connection with the Christian world, and they knew about these stories, and it's not like they were completely oblivious to it, but it wasn't part of the Talmud, it wasn't part of rabbinic writing. They didn't understand it. We understand it because we've seen the movie The Omen, and we've seen The Exorcist, and we know all this demonology from the Christian side. I mean, we had weird stuff. We had very weird superstitions in Judaism, but they weren't based on the same stuff. It wasn't based on the same kinds of issues. And for us, what scared us about hell was not some weird pagan vision of like remaking, taking pagan hell and then making it Christian hell. But we had this idea that there was an accountability after we died for what we did. And it wasn't, we weren't escaping it. So when we get to the rabbinic period, so the Bible we know doesn't describe it.
Right.
But for the rabbis, it becomes more of, well, I always tell people it's like the vision of purgatory in Christian stuff. But again, that's using Christian imagery. But the idea that people needed to be refined essentially from those elements of their lives that were not good. The idea was that essentially when we got to the next world, those pieces of us that we didn't need in the next world were burned off. And nobody wants to have it burned off because that hurts. But this idea of it being hell was definitely not there. But this idea, we had to give this up. We had to give up the attachments that we had to this world, which the idea, of course, is that the more you can detach yourself from those worldly desires in this world, the less you had to suffer in that purgatory. So the idea was for a really righteous person, and we're going to get to it. So I'm just giving you some background because it doesn't really describe it. But I'm telling you, the idea for it was based on this concept that the more we were attached to worldly things, the harder it was for it to make us this transition to the next existence. Yeah.
But he has a different level of.
Yes. So we do have different levels. And the levels essentially as we reach our potential in the next world, the idea, of course, was that, and again, people have said before, I was just listening to and I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but I was listening to somebody talk about the world of the Vikings, and their mythology was, of course, you get to fight and die every day in Valhalla. I mean, all the historians will say, all you need to know about a culture's values are what do they believe about heaven. And our belief was that there was a place where we could go where we're with God and we're with our ancestors, that we're with Abraham, Isaac, and Sarah, and Rebecca, and everybody, and all the holy people are together. That was the idea, is that like somehow we're in this Gan Eden, we're in this paradise where we're not suffering anymore, and that we're with the people who came before. No, I mean, even the righteous people have some level of humanity, of the human dust that has to be washed off or burned off before you get into the next world. But the idea is the harder it is for you the more attachments you have to this world, the harder it is. The more you soaked up Torah in this world, well, that's what you're going to be doing in the next world, right? So if you're surrounded by it here, then in the next world, you're already accommodated to, you're already ready for it. And so that's why people study in the yeshiva, because that's what heaven is. The less time you have to spend in this world worrying about money and worrying about that kind of stuff, it means in the next world, I'm already kind of living it now. And wow, I get to study with God in the next world. I get to study Talmud with God. And that's the Jewish visions of heaven that we have described, are that God is teaching us in the next world. We're sitting around an academy with God. So what's so amazing is that in heaven for us as Jews, we're studying, we're talking, we're discussing stuff. We're still learning. We're still evolving in some ways because we're getting new information. I mean, why else are you doing this? But it's pretty amazing that that's what they said. And so how we get out of this world is that we have to give an accounting for what we did in this world. How did we get through it? You're seeing it in Pirke Avot. What are the things that we're going to be judged on? How are we going to do it? But there is going to be an accountability for it. At some point, there is this understanding that the way we lived in this world, it's going to have an effect on us. And so let's try to not have that effect be bad. So that is the end of chapter 4. We're going to read a little bit into chapter 5 because there is going to be discussion about this in the next chapter as well. We're definitely not done with this concept of happens. But it's interesting, by the way, that there's this understanding that you may not have wanted to be born in the first place. There are definitely times when we say, why am I even here? So this is against your will you were born, against your will you live. So it doesn't matter whether you want to be here, whether you like being here, and it doesn't matter whether you like the system. I love that part because there is a system here. It's inescapable, and there's definitely a reason for it. And that's something that if we believe anything about the world to come, it's that this world must be necessary and that the world to come is where this all is leading to. So the next chapter, chapter 5 we're about to start, is filled with numerical sets, number sets. 10 things, 7 things, 4 things. And it's set up with these things. And the first one here, yeah, well, it's a good one because it's where it all began. Here's the first one. So it kind of begins at the beginning with creation. But this chapter is all about numbers. Here's the first one. With 10 utterances, the world was created. And what does this teach? For surely it could have been created with one utterance. But this was so in order to punish the wicked, who would destroy the world that was created with 10 utterances, and to give a good reward to the righteous, who maintained the world that was created with 10 utterances. And what are they talking about here? What are they talking about? What are these utterances? This is this idea, and you can just kind of see, show you a little bit of the commentary, at least in English. That is an interesting one. 9 times in the creation of, in the first chapter, it says, and God said, let there be light. God said, let there be a separation. God kept saying the words said. And so we believe that, and we say it in some of our prayers, that God spoke and the world came into existence. Why didn't it just say God said, let the world be created, and it happened? And so it says it 10 times. Well, actually, it says it 9 times. But the interesting thing is we have this other line from Psalms where it says, with the word of the Lord were the heavens made. And that's the 10th. But of course, we could also say that 9 is kind of like 10. But yeah, counting up how many times God says, God said. So the rabbis interpreted from that the world was created with 10 utterances, with 10 times. So what's interesting about this is that we have the power, according to this, to destroy the world. We also have the ability to preserve the world. And what I take away from this, at least, is that if God didn't even bring the world in with one step, think about how many steps there are to destroy the world and to keep the world sustained. Even God had steps. Even God needed, to some extent, to make this not all contingent on one thing. Well, first of all, it implies that there are stages to it, that there are steps to it, that there's a lot of levels to it. And 10 is definitely a symbolic number. It implies, 10 steps. 10 things is a lot. I mean, that's like not 70 or 100, but it is intent. We would say that even 3 things are intentional, but 10, that really shows a lot of intent. So God created the world with intention 10 times. And also, when we destroy the world with intention, we don't just do it once. We don't do it with one step. It takes a lot of steps to destroy the world, and that means we put intention into it. It means we didn't just do it willy-nilly. I didn't do it accidentally. And God didn't create the world that way. God didn't create the world by accident. We don't destroy the world by doing one thing, though we could, right? Yes. Yes, but there was a fear that we would destroy the world. But yeah, it wouldn't take one button press, it would take a few button presses to destroy the world. But yeah, it would take intention. It would take more than one step. And of course, it also means that for those who preserve the world with a lot of intention, it takes a lot of steps. And that's where they ended with. Look, God didn't create the world with just one moment. We don't destroy the world with just one moment. And we also don't preserve the world with just one moment. And think about how hard it is then, the good reward that the righteous have by keeping the world. And this idea that we keep the world, kayamin, we sustain the world, the righteous people sustain the world, is a really interesting idea, because it doesn't say that God sustains the world. It says the righteous sustain the world, which means that both the wicked and the righteous are us. The power to destroy the world or to make the world sustained is up to us. So this is really powerful. God did the first one, the creation of it, but the destruction of it and the sustaining of it, it's up to us. And it has intention. And it takes a lot of work, but it's definitely shows our reward, our Sachar Tov. You've heard the name Sachar Tov before? It's actually Doreen Habecker's maiden name, Sachar Tov. It means good reward. We want a Sachar Tov. We want a good reward. Good reward. It's a good reward for the righteous. They've earned it. They're keeping the world alive, right? We have a tradition, by the way, that there's 36 righteous people that keep the world alive. They're Lamed Vavniks. We call them Lamed Vavniks. And we don't know who they are. Sometimes the traditions, they don't know who they are, but they're like the superheroes that keep the world alive. There always has to be 36 of them. So there's been, some people have written fantasy or science fiction books about, or stories, short stories about Lamed Vavniks, but they're not supposed to know necessarily who they are. Or if they do, they're not supposed to tell people that they are. And they're not supposed to, well, they don't necessarily have easy lives either. That's the weird thing. They're not necessarily, but they're the ones who sustain the world. So when we talk about a Lamed Vavnik, you might have heard that word before. It's the 36. Lamed Vav means 36. That's the numbers, Lamed and Vav. And those are the 36 people who keep the world alive by their goodness, by their righteousness. So that's 10. The next one is also 10, but in this case, it's 10 generations. So this is getting us into a little bit of kind of the Midrash that we've read before too. There were 10 generations from Adam to Noah in order to make known what long suffering is his. For all those generations kept on provoking him until he brought upon them the waters of the flood. So God suffered through 10 generations of bad people from Adam to Noah, which seems to imply that Adam wasn't such a great guy either. Well, we kind of know that. But all the way up to Noah's generation, they were really bad. And it comes out to 10 generations. If you look at it, there's 10 generations. And then there's 10 generations from Noah to Abraham in order to make known what long suffering is his. So God puts up with this, for all those generations kept on provoking him until Abraham came and received the reward of all of them, which is there's 10 generations, according to tradition, from Adam to Noah, and it's what's in the Bible, and 10 from Noah to Abraham. So Noah is that in-between person. And of course, we understand Noah to be a good guy, but maybe he wasn't totally good in the sense that maybe he wasn't quite developed enough. So he survives, but it takes another 10 generations before we have a person who can put the world on the right path, which is Abraham. And so this is why we call ourselves the children of Abraham and not the children of Noah. Noah, yeah. Noah, the movie, definitely, that was done by Darren Aronofsky, who read the Midrash extensively. The Midrash is throughout the book, the story of Noah. It's completely based on Midrash. So it's very interesting, very powerful. And it's also based on this idea that Noah really kind of didn't get it. And that's kind of what we get from the Bible. And so the rabbis interpreted it as Noah was missing some stuff, which is why Abraham is the one that God had this covenant with. Noah preserved humanity, so he's good enough to get us to that next stage. But what's interesting in the movie, Aronofsky at least put out, was that Noah knows he's not good. Noah wants humanity to end. He doesn't want his children to procreate in the movie, the Russell Crowe movie, because he knows that that same stuff that was in the previous generations is still with him. So he doesn't want it to continue. Well, we know that Canaan ends up, that Ham and Canaan are part of this, have this part of themselves that as well, that's a problem. And it's why Abraham, when he's confronted with God wanting to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, says, hey, wait, God, you can't destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Maybe there are good people there. And that's the difference between Abraham and Noah. Because Noah is told by God, I'm destroying the world. And no one ever says anything. No one ever says why. No one never says, maybe there's a couple good people. I mean, there weren't, at least according to what seems to be the case, but no one ever asked. What makes Abraham different and what makes Abraham our ancestor is he actually questioned God and said, maybe there's good people, God. You can't destroy good people too. And maybe Noah's lack of asking that question was an indicator that humanity wasn't ready yet. That's what we understand it.
But yet he didn't ask. Go to God and say, why are you telling me?
Kill my son. So maybe Abraham hadn't fully evolved yet,
Well, right.
which is maybe why he had to get down to Jacob. Because Jacob is the one who essentially says, if you think about it, by the way, that's a good point though. Is flawed. But this flaw that Abraham has of not defending his son or not saying, hey, now again, the Midrash has him defending his son. So when God says, who do I, when God says, take your son, he says, which son? He says, well, your favorite son. He goes, well, I love all my sons. He says, Isaac, because it doesn't just say, God didn't say, God, take Isaac. It says, God, take your son, your favorite son, Isaac. And so the rabbis interpreted that. That's actually a conversation that Abraham has. But yes, we don't have that conversation. And that is missing. But one could say that we're really the children of Jacob because Jacob does care about all his sons. And he says, I love Joseph. Maybe he loved Joseph a little too much, but he loves Joseph, but he also loves Benjamin. He doesn't want Benjamin to go out with the rest of the brothers. And he never disowns his children, even though they do bad things to him, including Reuben, who slept with his concubine, slept with Bilhah. Can't get much worse than that, but he didn't disown him. I mean, he didn't, because it wasn't as proud of him, but he didn't kick him out. He didn't kick him out of the family. So maybe again, that's what Jacob does. Never really talked about that before, but that is a good midrash that Jacob corrects and now, by the way, we don't know that Isaac loves Esau, so it doesn't seem like he doesn't like it. It seems like he likes his sons too. No, we really don't know whether Isaac was even put in a situation where he had to think about that. But regardless, what we know is that Abraham did receive the reward of the people that came before him, which God couldn't give to them because they didn't deserve it. And so this is what the sachar is, again, the word sachar, the reward is. He got the reward of all of them. He finally got it. And so Abraham was the one who, after now 20 generations, that's a good question. So how many generations, Mike just asked, how many generations, if there's 20 generations from Adam to Abraham, how many generations are we removed? So look, if you look at how many years ago Abraham would have been, so let's say it's 4,000 years. And again, we've pointed this out before, this generational differences is important for the Christians, by the way, because we said that in the book of Matthew, in the Gospel of Matthew, the Christians also have 14 generations from, and they changed the dynastic line of David to make it work, but they have 14 generations from well, actually, why don't I show you? Because I can do this. But this 10 generation stuff, yeah, it's weird to think. It didn't go away because the Christians also did a midrash on this. I'll just show you because it's right at the beginning. It's very easy to find. But let me take you there. So, let me just get it up there where you can see here it is. So here you have the genealogy of Jesus, right? Which is a little ironic because if he's the son of God, what difference does it make whether he is? But it says right here, the son of David. So he has Abraham, right? He's got 14 generations from Abraham to King David. And then from David to Jeconiah, he has 14 generations. And then from Jeconiah to Jesus, he has 15 generations. So there they made, and he says right here, there were 14 generations from Abraham to David. I mean, just so you know, I didn't count it. He said it. 14 generations from David to the exile and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. So it fit very neatly there. Now, they didn't bring over the genealogy actually from the Bible. They changed it a little bit. We don't know any of these people. We know these people because they're all they're the descendants of Solomon, right? Solomon, Rehoboam, Abia, these are here. They actually changed them a little bit, but that's not the problem. By the way, again, they have Josiah and then through Jeconiah. So for those who've read the book of Kings with us on Tuesday mornings, we know about this king, right? Josiah had 3 sons who became kings, Jehoahaz, Jeconiah, and then the last one, Zedekiah. But he's descended through Jeconiah, who, again, according to the Bible, was taken into exile in Babylon, and his kids survived. Zedekiah's sons, remember, are executed in front of him, and then he gets blinded. It's the last thing he ever sees. Well, it wouldn't help if Jesus was descended from one of Zedekiah's sons, because they were all killed. He didn't have any kids. By the way, did you see that Shogun? Did you see Shogun? There's in the episode of Shogun, there was a guy who has to commit. I don't want to talk about it. If you didn't see it, you didn't see. But yeah, there was a whole thing about cutting off someone's line, of not having any descendants. Pretty well. Anyways, these folks, we don't know any of these people. We don't know any of them. They're not mentioned, but they're all legitimate names. It's not like it could have not happened, but these are names we don't have. But here we have Joseph. His father's name is Jacob, which is like a reverse of, this is Jacob and Joseph from the Bible, but Matan, Eleazar, we don't know these people. So that would come out to 42 generations to 2,000 years ago. Now, again, I'm not saying we use that as the marker, but if we did that, if we looked at, well, we don't want to look at necessarily Abraham as well. So if we say, let's just do that. So say Jesus was 0, so 2,000 years, 42 generations. If we did that math, then you would say roughly, and again, they made this work. I'm not saying that this is real, but this is what they said. I don't know. So it'd be about 85 generations from Abraham, which isn't that many if you think. I guess it is a lot, but if somebody gave you a list of 85 people, and you'd be like, wait a second, there's only 85 generations from me back to Abraham? That doesn't seem right. It would, if you did the math. 42. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but it's weird to think. You say you'd only have to go back 85 generations, 100 generations to get back to Abraham. Doesn't seem like a lot. Not to me, at least. I don't know about you, but it's weird to think you go back 4,000 years. But yeah, so this is something that people thought about, talked about, calculated, but that's not really the issue, right? How many it was. It's what the lesson is from it, which is that the people didn't have it the first 10 generations, and they didn't really have it the next 10 generations, which is why it takes a whole lot more time. Now, again, these generations are long generations. The ones with Abraham, Adam to Noah, that's thousands of years, according to right? It's literally like 4,000 years, or not 4,000. It's another 2,000 years, 2,700 years. If we go back No, yeah, it's like 7,000 years. It'd be like 2,000 years to get to 4,000 years ago. So that's a long time for those first 10 generations. But, or 20 generations. Well, that's what it said. So this is why, those generations pass. So we read one of those. I will tell you that the, that the one we're going to read next week, the next couple that we'll read next week, we will be in person next week, and hopefully it won't be raining. We're going to get to the 10 trials of Abraham, the 10 miracles done for us when we lived in Egypt, which were, plagues. But then there were 10 miracles at the sea, which we don't really think about. We just think of the sea parting as one miracle. Rabbis are going to teach us that there were 10 miracles that happened in that moment. And then we, of course, get to 10 wonders that we get to the temple. We didn't get to this today, but one of you, I think it was you, Mike, that said about sacrifices, right? Didn't you say that? Something about this? I think you said something about the sacrifices. Here it says that no fly was ever found in the slaughterhouse at the temple. So just so you know, they didn't want to think that was what they wanted to think that was a miracle. But again, we're going to read some of these things that were numbers. No flies. But you said something about, yeah, and that's so they yeah, well, yeah, so we'll get to that next week, so that you can see that these numbers will go all the way through. We'll read next week. We'll get to 4 types of characters, whole 4 types of temperaments. So the numbers are really big, and of course we get to the 4 children in the Haggadah, which we'll get to in a few weeks. We get to the 4 children, 4 questions. These numbers, the rabbis love them. They love number games. They love number questions. They love these kinds of things of well, there's 4 types of this. There's 10 types of this, and so they're interesting ones. The 10 trials of Abraham, though, I will tell you, this is an interesting one. You can look it up because we can't get into it too much. It was interesting that Abraham had 10 trials. We'll look at them. You can look them up in the Midrash on if you want to read the more in-depth one. But think about this. When the Jews wrote about the 10 trials of Abraham, our ancestor, about this. Maya loved this when I was a kid. There were 10 trials of Hercules. Do you think that was a coincidence? I don't, because it was written at the same time. The 10 trials, right? So anyone who ever loved those Hercules movies, those old Hercules movies, that was part of Greek mythology, 10 trials. So the people we lived around in those days had similar stories. So some of them, I think, were not just plays on stuff that we had to teach us a lesson, but also a riff on their culture. Different numbers.
There's a song by the rock star John Anderson. Yeah, lead singer, yeah, he did so well. And there's a song called "Song of Seven," and it's all about that.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll listen to that. John Anderson's "Song of Seven." John Anderson from Yes. Yep.
Oh, he's still around.
There you go. So, yeah, we'll have a chance to think about that, though. The cultural appropriation, borrowing, going back and forth between our culture and other cultures. Definitely think about that because, as I mentioned, Friday night we'll have Joe Buchanan here, which is borrowing from our American culture, which I would say is also reflective of what we've done over time, including the music that went back and forth with klezmer music and with Yiddish music back in the 30s and 40s, when there was a classic song in Yiddish that became a hit by Mir Bistushane, right? The
Yeah.
Andrews sisters sang it. It's a Yiddish song. By the way, they wanted to sing it. They wanted to sing it in Yiddish. My dad played it all the time. The Andrews sisters wanted to sing it in Yiddish, and their own Jewish management said, "You sing it in English. We don't want you to sing it in Yiddish." They wanted to sing it in Yiddish, but the Jews said, "No, no, no, don't sing it in Yiddish." We had it in Yiddish, obviously the people who wrote it, but that was a time when we borrowed music back and forth, and the Jewish music wasn't even. No one even like it was the music. It was the most popular music on the radio. Can you imagine Taylor Swift singing in Yiddish? That's what you have to imagine, by the way. You have to imagine that people were appropriating songs back and forth, and the music was that's why we say it was a golden age. But yeah, it hasn't stopped. Maybe at least for music, it hasn't been the same. But who knows? Who knows? We'll see. Matis Yahu is the closest we've had to a crossover artist who was singing Jewish songs and meaningful Jewish songs that also made it kind of on the air. Connie Francis sang Yiddish songs. We used to play, my dad played those too, but the Connie Francis stuff was interesting because it showed you that I know, but and non-Jewish artists that would sing those songs, but it was that already was a later version of this kind of cultural borrowing that happened. But yeah, there was a time when that really happened, that a Yiddish song was not just the #1 song in America, but it was played all around the world. It's interesting to think.
Serious XM60s or 50s, why they play it once.
Yeah, it's a great song. It's a great song. And there's a lot of great Yiddish music that unfortunately never made it, but it was also had a great beat and a great song. So if you listen to the Berry Sisters, which I also grew up with singing Yiddish songs, but these were great music. Great music. It was great music. And actually, you forget how great Jewish music was in that era. How many composers were Jewish? And we know that they wrote all the great Christmas songs, but they were also, this was the music that they were steeped in. He liked it. I don't know. Anyways, that's for people who listen to the radio on Sundays with us. All right, everybody. We hope to see you Friday. And don't forget, next Monday is a Red Robin meal for Eat for TBA. We're going to send out a reminder again for everybody, but maybe we'll see you Monday night too. And then there's Mahjong on Sunday. There's a lot of stuff happening. But if you're not with us in town, please, again, stay healthy and stay well. And we look forward to seeing you online at least for Friday. So take care, everybody. Be well. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.